In the shadowed heart of the ancient castle, where the throne of obsidian whispered secrets to the wind, a single drop of forgotten blood etched the first crack in eternity's facade. Ilara had always believed that servitude was her sentence for sins she could not name. At 28, she was a wisp of a woman, her skin pale as the frost that clung to the castle's turrets, her eyes hollowed by years of feverish illness that no herbalist in the forsaken village below could cure. Abandoned by a family who whispered of curses when her coughs echoed through their thatched home, she had stumbled upon the castle's gates one storm-lashed night, half dead from the ague that gnawed at her lungs. The villagers called it the Black Keep, a relic of wars long buried, where the King of Shadows ruled unseen. Desperation had driven her to knock, and mercy, or something darker, had opened the doors. Now she dusted the halls, mended the faded tapestries, and avoided the gaze of the eternal ones who lurked in the gloom. The vampire king, Thorn, was no monster of tavern tales. Centuries had carved him into a figure of quiet torment, born in the blood-soaked fields of a medieval battlefield, where he had chosen the bite of immortality over the blade of defeat. At what mortals would call 500 years, he bore the weight of empires risen and fallen, alliances forged in silver and betrayal. His solitude was a crown heavier than gold. Guilt shadowed him like the mist that rolled from the moors, a remnant of the lover he had turned in a fit of desperate love, only to watch her wither into madness under eternity's unrelenting gaze. Ethical to a fault, he forbade his court from hunting the innocent, sustaining on the crimson essence of willing outcasts or the beasts of the wild. Yet in the quiet hours, he pondered the philosophers of old, Plato's Forms, Augustine's Confessions, questioning if his endless nights were penance or prison. Ilara's days blurred into a rhythm of shadowed labor. The throne room was her most dreaded charge, a vast chamber of vaulted stone lit by flickering candelabros that cast elongated shadows like grasping fingers. The throne itself loomed at the far end, a monolithic seat of polished obsidian veined with silver, cold to the touch even in summer. She approached it that evening with a bucket of vinegar-scented water and a rag worn thin from use, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and distant rain pattering against leaded windows. Her cough rattled in her chest, a wet, insistent reminder of her fragility as she knelt before the seat of power. The velvet cushions, black as midnight, were dusted with the fine silt of time. She lifted them carefully, her fingers brushing something metallic beneath. A ring. Simple, unadorned silver, etched with a faint crest of thorns entwined, a symbol she did not recognize, yet it hummed against her skin like a half-remembered dream. She slipped it into her apron pocket, heart quickening, and continued her work. The cloth glided over the armrests, smoothing away the ghosts of fingerprints that were not quite human. As she polished the silver veins, a draft stirred the flames, sending golden light dancing across the stone. It was then she felt it. Eyes upon her, not the predatory stare of the lesser vampires who slunk through the corridors, but something deeper, more ancient. Thorn watched from the alcove, his form cloaked in the velvety black of twilight. He had not meant to linger. The throne room was a place of ritual, not observation. But there was a fragility in her movements that pulled at him, a mortal grace amid the decay. She was no Vampiro, no half-breed forged in his world's shadowed unions, those women who danced on the edge of his kind's affections, their romances laced with blood and forbidden fire. Ilara was purely human, her life a flickering candle against his endless dark. He rationalized his interest as pity. The castle needed servants who could withstand its chill without crumbling. Yet, as she rose, wiping sweat from her brow, her cough echoing softly like distant thunder, he felt the stirrings of something he had long buried. Curiosity, laced with the ache of connection. That night, as the moon silvered the battlements, Ilara retreated to her chamber, a narrow garret with a single window overlooking the misty valleys. The ring weighed heavy in her pocket. She drew it out, holding it to the candle's glow. The thorns seemed to writhe, and in its reflection she glimpsed not her face, but a flash of crimson eyes. A shiver ran through her, not of fear, but of an inexplicable pull. Down below, in the great hall, Thorn paced, the scent of her, faint lavender from the soaps she used, lingering in his senses. He had sworn off the warmth of mortal bonds. They ended in dust, leaving only echoes of guilt. Love was a curse he could not afford, a redemption that demanded sacrifice. But fate, that invisible puppeteer, had other designs. As Ilara slipped the ring onto her finger, a warmth bloomed in her chest, easing the fever's grip for the first time in months. She gasped, pressing a hand to her heart, where the beat steadied, strong and sure. In the throne room, Thorn froze, his own ancient blood stirring in response, a ritual unspoken, binding the forgotten relic to a soul adrift. The choice loomed. To approach her, to unravel the thread, or to let the shadows claim them both. And in that suspended breath, as the rain intensified against the glass, Ilara whispered to the empty room, "What have I awakened?" The castle seemed to hold its silence, waiting for the fall. The warmth from the ring seeped into Ilara's veins, like sunlight piercing winter's veil, a gentle thaw against the perpetual chill that had claimed her bones. She stared at her hand in the dim flicker of the garret's candle, the silver band glinting with an inner fire that mirrored the steady rhythm now pulsing in her chest. Her cough, that relentless specter, had retreated into silence, leaving only the echo of rain lashing the window panes like impatient fingers. The air in the room thickened, carrying the faint metallic tang of old stone and something sweeter, jasmine perhaps, blooming impossibly in the night. She twisted the ring, tracing the etched thorns that seemed to pulse faintly, alive with secrets. It was no mere trinket. It was a key, unlocking doors she had not known existed within herself. Down in the labyrinthine depths of the Black Keep, Thorn halted his pacing, his senses attuned to the subtle shift in the castle's ancient hum. The ring, his ring, lost to the folds of time after the lover who had worn it, crumbled to ash in his arms, had chosen again. He could feel its bond reforming, a silken thread weaving through the ether, tugging at the edges of his solitude. Guilt coiled in his gut like smoke from a dying fire. He had sworn to let no mortal cross that threshold again. Eternity was a solitary vigil, a penance for the wars he had waged, the thrones he had claimed in blood and shadow. Born amid the clamor of clashing steel in a forgotten crusade, he had risen from the mud as a king among the night, forging a realm where ethics tempered the hunger. His court, a fragile alliance of vampires bound by oaths rather than chains, whispered of encroaching threats, rival clans from the eastern spires, hungry for his obsidian throne, plotting in the fog-shrouded borders. Yet none of that turmoil stirred him now as fiercely as this. A human woman, fragile as frost, awakening what he had buried. Ilara rose from her narrow cot, the floorboards creaking under her bare feet like the sighs of long-dead ancestors. The castle felt different tonight, its walls less oppressive, the shadows softer at the edges. She slipped into the corridor, the ring's warmth guiding her like a compass toward the throne room. Moonlight filtered through arrow-slit windows, painting the stone in silver strokes, while the distant murmur of voices drifted from the great hall below. The court's nocturnal council, no doubt, debating alliances and betrayals. Her illness had always confined her to the fringes, a ghost among the eternal. But now strength bloomed in her limbs, urging her forward. She paused at the throne room's arched doorway, the heavy oak door ajar, exhaling the scent of polished wood and lingering incense. Inside, the candelabros had burned low, their flames guttering like weary breaths. The obsidian throne gleamed under the lunar glow, its silver veins catching the light in hypnotic patterns. Alara stepped closer, her fingers trailing the armrest she had cleaned hours before, the stone cool and unyielding. The ring hummed against her skin, and in its reflection on the polished surface, she saw not her own face, but a fleeting vision. A battlefield strewn with fallen banners, a man in armor kneeling before a woman crowned in thorns. The image dissolved as quickly as mist, leaving her breathless. "Who are you?" she murmured to the empty chamber, her voice a fragile thread in the vastness. A shadow detached from the alcove, materializing with the grace of wind through silk. Thorn emerged, his presence filling the room like the onset of dusk, tall, cloaked in black velvet that whispered against the stone, his eyes the color of aged wine, deep and fathomless. He moved not with the predatory stalk of his kin, but with a measured restraint, as if each step weighed the cost of intrusion. "The ring calls to you," he said, his voice low and resonant, carrying the timbre of centuries, like thunder rolling over distant hills. "It should not. Return it, and perhaps the awakening will fade." Alara's heart, newly vital, pounded against her ribs, a drumbeat echoing the rain's cadence outside. She clutched her hand to her chest, the thorns of the band pressing into her palm like a lover's urgent grasp. He was no myth made flesh. His face bore the lines of human sorrow etched by time, high cheekbones shadowed by stubble, lips curved in perpetual melancholy. Yet there was power in him, an undercurrent of restrained storm, and she felt it pull at her, rationalizing it as the fever's delusion, even as inevitability settled in her bones. "It eases the sickness," she replied, her words steady despite the tremor in her voice. "Like a promise kept in the dark, why does it matter to you?" Thorn's gaze lingered on the ring, a flicker of pain crossing his features like a cloud over the moon. He had lost Isolde to the ring's curse, the artifact forged in alchemical fires by a long-dead sorcerer, binding wearer to wearer across the veil of death. It promised redemption through love, but delivered only the torment of watching mortality fray. "It matters because it binds," he confessed, stepping closer, the air between them thickening with the scent of his skin, earth after rain, laced with the faint copper of blood long denied. "I am Thorn, guardian of this keep, and you. You tread where shadows devour light. Your life is a candle. Do not let it gutter for echoes of the past." She met his eyes, the intimacy of the moment wrapping around them like velvet fog. The castle's chill seeped through her thin shift, but the ring's warmth held it at bay, stirring a defiance she had not known she possessed. Abandoned, ill, she had survived on scraps of will. Now, this stranger's warning ignited something deeper, a curiosity laced with longing, resisted yet blooming like nightshade in cracked earth. "Shadows have been my companions longer than light," she said softly, her breath visible in the cool air. "If this binds me to something worth the risk, perhaps it's a choice I make." He reached out, his fingers hovering near hers, the space between charged with unspoken ritual. The touch never landed, but the air hummed, the flames in the candelabros flaring brighter, casting their faces in golden relief. Thorn withdrew, the weight of his guilt a visible shroud. He turned empires with a word, quelled wars with a glance, yet this mortal's resolve unraveled him. Love was no swift arrow. It was a slow poison, sweet and inexorable. As the council's voices rose faintly from below, hints of betrayal from the eastern clans, a spy unmasked, he knew the keep's fragile peace teetered. And now, this woman, with her thorn-bound hand, threatened to upend it all. Alara watched him retreat into the gloom, the ring's warmth fading to an insistent ache. She pressed her palm to the throne, feeling the stone's pulse sync with her own, a revelation dawning. The seat of power was no cold relic, but a living witness to choices unmade. Outside, the rain swelled to a torrent, drumming like war drums on the ancient roof. In the great hall, Thorn rejoined his court, their eyes turning to him with veiled suspicion, but his thoughts lingered on her, the human who had polished his throne and stirred the dead. As dawn's first gray light clawed at the horizon, Elara returned to her garret, the ring a burning secret. But in the mirror's cracked surface, her reflection wavered, eyes flashing with an unnatural crimson gleam. The choice had begun, and with it, the shadows whispered of transformation neither could escape. What price would eternity demand of her fragile soul? The crimson gleam in Elara's reflection lingered like a forbidden kiss, fading as she blinked into the gathering dawn. She tore her gaze from the cracked mirror, the garret's air heavy with the scent of damp stone and the faint acrid bite of extinguished candle wax. Her hand trembled as she removed the ring, placing it on the rough-hewn windowsill where the first light of morning crept in, silvering its thorns. Sleep evaded her that day. Instead, visions flickered at the edges of her mind. Fragments of battles lost, lovers lost, a throne stained with the ink of forgotten oaths. The illness that had hollowed her for years now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a vitality that hummed through her veins, both exhilarating and unnerving. She rationalized it as a trick of the light, a desperate mind weaving illusions from exhaustion. Yet deep within, a whisper urged her to reclaim the band, to embrace the pull toward the unknown. By evening, as the castle stirred from its diurnal slumber, Elara descended to the kitchens, her steps lighter on the worn flagstones. The servants, a handful of mortals like her, bound by poverty or curse, bustled with preparations for the court's feast. Whispers circulated among them. The eastern clans had sent envoys under truce banners, their vampires sleek and treacherous, eyes gleaming with ambitions that threatened the Black Keep's fragile sovereignty. Elara poured mulled wine into goblets etched with silver thorns, her fingers brushing the pattern that mirrored the ring's design. The liquid steamed, carrying notes of clove and blood-red berries, a subtle nod to the Eternal One's tastes. She avoided the eyes of the Vampiro attendants, women of half-shadowed lineage, their beauty laced with an otherworldly allure, often entangled in romances that burned bright and brief with the court's lords. Elara was no such creature. She was earthbound, her desires tempered by suffering, yet the ring's absence left her adrift, yearning for the warmth it had bestowed. Thorn convened the council in the great hall, a cavernous space vaulted with ribs of ancient oak, where tapestries depicted wars of fang and blade. The fire in the massive hearth roared, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters across the long oaken table. His advisors, veteran vampires with faces scarred by centuries of intrigue, leaned forward, their voices a murmur of silk over steel. "The envoys demand tribute," said Lyrian, a lithe female with eyes like polished jet, her loyalty forged in the fires of a long-ago betrayal. "They speak of unity against the hunters from the south, but their spies slink through our borders like rats." Thorn sat at the head, his fingers drumming the arm of his chair, the obsidian throne's twin in miniature. He felt the ring's echo in his blood, a persistent throb that distracted him from the politics of survival. Every immortal was once someone who chose not to die, he reminded himself, a mantra against the guilt that clawed at his resolve. He had built this realm on ethics, no innocents slain, no forced turns, only willing souls stepping into the night. But love? That was the true war, one that eroded thrones from within. As the council adjourned, Thorn slipped away, drawn inexorably to the throne room. The air there was cooler, laced with the faint lavender of Elara's soaps, now mingled with the earthy petrichor of recent rain. He found her there, kneeling once more before the obsidian seat, rag in hand, though the stone gleamed pristine from her earlier labors. She had donned a simple woolen gown, its hem frayed, but her posture held a new assurance, the slump of illness banished. The ring lay on the floor beside her, discarded yet within reach, as if testing its own power. "You returned to it," Thorn observed, his voice emerging from the gloom like a confession. He stepped into the candlelight, the flames bowing slightly in his presence, their glow illuminating the fine lines of weariness around his eyes. 5 centuries had not dulled the philosopher in him. He pondered the Stoics in quiet hours, questioning if fate was a chain or a choice. Alara looked up, her breath catching at the sight of him, not as a king, but as a man burdened by shadows. The room's textures enveloped them, the velvet hush of the cushions, the distant patter of droplets from the eaves, the cool silk of moonlight threading through the windows. "It calls," she admitted, her voice steady, laced with the intimacy of shared secrets. "But I fear what it awakens. In the mirror I saw eyes like yours, crimson. Am I losing myself or finding something buried?" He knelt before her, a gesture that silenced the room's echoes, their faces level in the golden flicker. The proximity stirred the air, charged with the scent of his ancient aura, aged leather and storm-kissed earth, mingling with her mortal warmth. Thorn extended his hand, palm up, an invitation to the ritual unspoken. "The ring is no mere relic," he said, his tone grave, philosophical, "forged in the alchemical crucibles of a sorcerer who sought to bind souls across the veil. It eases suffering, yes, but at a cost. It draws the wearer into eternity's gaze. My Isolde wore it once, in the throes of a love that defied wars and kings. She chose immortality for me, only to unravel in the endless nights, her humanity a ghost haunting her form. I swore never to let it claim another." Alara's fingers hovered over the ring, the thorns seeming to reach for her. The revelation hung between them. This was the moment of choice, not just for her fragile life, but for the solitude he had armored himself in. Her heart ached with the weight of it. Abandonment had taught her the bitterness of isolation, her family's rejection a wound that festered like her illness. Yet Thorn's guilt mirrored her despair, a bridge of shared shadow. "And if I choose to wear it?" she whispered, her eyes searching his, the intimacy raw, resisted yet inevitable. "Does it redeem us or curse us further? Your world is one of choices deferred, mine of endings embraced. Perhaps together we rewrite the script." His hand closed over hers, the touch electric, a spark that ignited the air. The ring slid onto her finger unbidden, its silver warming instantly, flooding her with visions. Thorn's birth in bloodied fields, the rise of his throne amid betrayals, the lover's final mad plea under a thorn-crowned moon. Pain and redemption intertwined, the ritual sealing a bond that thrummed like a shared heartbeat. Thorn pulled back, anguish etching his features. For in that instant, he glimpsed her potential transformation, not death, but a Vampir's edge, teetering on immortality's brink. The court's envoys waited in the antechamber, their whispers of alliance masking daggers, but this personal war eclipsed them all. As Alara rose, strength surging through her, a shadow stirred at the room's periphery. Lyrian, watching with narrowed eyes, her loyalty fracturing at the sight of her king's vulnerability. The rain resumed outside, a mournful dirge against the glass, underscoring the dilemma: love as salvation or snare, eternity as gift or grave. Alara pressed a hand to her throat, feeling the pulse quicken unnaturally, crimson flickering in her periphery. Thorn turned away, whispering to the empty air, "What have we unleashed?" But the bond held fast, pulling them toward a precipice where choices could shatter kingdoms or forge them anew. In the hall beyond, the envoys' voices rose in veiled threat, a spy's betrayal unraveling the keep's peace. Ilara's eyes met Thorn's one last time, the thorns on her finger drawing a bead of blood, hers, yet tasting of eternity. The transformation whispered promises, but at what cost to her soul or his throne? And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments, Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The bead of blood from Ilara's finger welled like a crimson tear, tracing the thorn's edge before absorbing into the silver, vanishing as if the ring had drunk it whole. She stared at her hand, the skin unmarked now, but the throb lingered, a pulse that echoed not just her heart, but something vast and ancient, syncing with the castle's own hidden rhythm. The throne room's air grew heavier, the flames in the candelabros steadying into a hypnotic glow that bathed the obsidian seat in veins of molten gold. Outside, the rain had softened to a mournful drizzle, tapping the leaded panes like fingers seeking entry, while the distant voices of the envoys sharpened into accusations, their truce fraying like old silk. Thorn's back remained turned, his shoulders taut beneath the velvet cloak, the weight of 5 centuries pressing down as if the stone ceiling itself conspired to crush him. He had felt the bond ignite, a ritual older than his throne, forged in the desperate alchemy of a sorcerer who believed love could defy the grave. Isolde's face haunted him then, her laughter turning to screams as eternity stripped her joys, leaving only the hollow echo of what was lost. Guilt was his constant shadow, a philosophical torment. Was immortality a gift of the gods, or a philosopher's stone turned poison? He had chosen it on that bloodied field, amid the clamor of dying men and the bite of a rival lord's curse, rising not as a conqueror but as a guardian, vowing ethics over savagery. His realm, this black keep perched on moors scarred by forgotten wars, was a testament to that oath. No forced hunts, no innocence drained, only alliances tempered by restraint. Yet now, with Ilara's mortal fragility threading into his endless night, he questioned if redemption lay in isolation or in the reckless bridge of connection. Ilara stepped forward, the woolen gown whispering against the flagstones, her bare feet chilled by the stone's unyielding kiss. The ring's warmth spread upward, coiling through her arms like liquid sunlight, easing the phantom ache of her lungs, but igniting a hunger she could not name, a thirst for truths buried in shadow. Abandoned by kin who saw her illness as a blight, she had learned to navigate solitude's sharp edges, rationalizing survival as mere endurance. But this pull toward Thorn was no fever dream. It was inevitable, a gravitational force resisted in her mind yet yielding in her soul. "You speak of curses," she said, her voice emerging soft yet resolute, carrying the texture of rain-soaked earth. "But I feel no chains, only clarity. The visions it shows, your wars, your losses, they mirror my own fractures. Is this the choice you fear, or the one you've awaited in silence?" He turned then, slowly, his eyes meeting hers in the candlelit intimacy, the space between them alive with unspoken tension. The scent of him enveloped her, aged vellum and storm wind, laced with the faint forbidden copper of blood restrained. Thorn's hand rose, not to touch, but to hover near her cheek, the air shimmering as if charged by lightning veiled in fog. "Clarity is eternity's cruelest illusion," he murmured, his tone a philosopher's lament, deep and resonant like echoes in a crypt. "It promises light, but delivers the weight of every shadow cast. I built this throne on choices that spared others my fate, alliances with clans who once warred for these lands, pacts sealed in silver rather than slaughter. The envoys beyond these walls come not for peace, but to test those bonds, their spies weaving betrayal like thorns in a crown. And you polish the seat of that fragile power, awakening what should remain asleep." The words hung, philosophical introspection weaving through the room's sensory veil, the velvet hush of cushions undisturbed, the distant creak of settling beams, the moonlight fracturing through rain-streaked glass into prisms of silver and indigo. Ilara's fingers flexed, the ring's thorns a subtle pressure, symbolic anchor to the dilemmas unfolding. She had glimpsed in its visions the Vampiro women of his court, hybrids of blood and dusk, their romances fierce and fleeting, binding vampires in passions that skirted the edge of damnation. But she was no such bridge. Her humanity was her blade, cutting through his rationalizations. "Then teach me the shadows," she challenged, stepping closer, the intimacy raw, her breath mingling with his in the cool air. "I've lived with death as a constant guest. Coughs that rattled like chains, family whispers calling me cursed. This ring doesn't steal, it restores. If love is the curse you name, perhaps it's the redemption we both crave, resisted no longer." Thorn's resolve cracked, a fissure in obsidian, as he closed the distance. His fingers brushed hers, the contact a revelation. Skin to skin, mortal warmth meeting eternal chill, igniting a spark that flared the candelabros brighter, shadows retreating like defeated foes. In that touch, memories flooded shared. Alara saw the battlefield of his turning, the mud slick with blood under a thorn-laced sky. Thorn felt her abandonment, the fevered nights in a village hovel, death's invisible hand hovering. The ritual deepened, not a turning but a merging, her vitality lending him a fleeting humanity, his ancient wisdom steadying her transformation's edge. Pain and pleasure intertwined, sensual without vulgarity, a dance of light and shadow where guilt met defiance. Yet the moment shattered as Lyrian burst through the doorway, her jet eyes flashing with accusation, the Vampir's lithe form clad in crimson silk that pooled like spilled wine. "My king," she hissed, voice a blade wrapped in silk. "The envoys have unmasked their spy, one of our own, turned traitor for Eastern gold. They demand your presence, or the truce dissolves into war. And this? Mortal?" Her gaze raked Alara, lingering on the ring with venomous recognition. Betrayal's scent thickened the air, political intrigue crashing against personal revelation like waves on jagged cliffs. Thorn withdrew, the bond's warmth lingering like an afterimage, his face a mask of tormented resolve. He nodded to Lyrian, the court's fragile ethics teetering on this precipice, war without, transformation within. Alara clutched the ring, her pulse racing with unnatural fervor, crimson flecks dancing in her vision as strength surged, promising power, but whispering of the soul's erosion. She had chosen the bond, but at what cost to the keep's peace or her fading mortality? As Thorn strode toward the hall, the rain intensifying once more, Alara followed the pull, stepping into the fray. In the antechamber, the envoys awaited, their fangs glinting in false smiles, but Lyrian's hand on Thorn's arm spoke of deeper shadows, jealousy, ambition, a Vampir's forbidden longing, twisting into treachery. Ilara's presence, marked by the thorned ring, drew their stares, a human ascending, or a pawn in the unfolding war. The choice had ignited a fire that could redeem or raze the Black Keep, leaving Thorn to wonder if eternity's mercy extended to those who dared love across the veil. Alara's hand trembled, the blood's echo calling her forward into a night where thrones bowed not to kings, but to the inevitable heart. The antechamber's vaulted ceiling loomed like the ribcage of some ancient beast, its stones etched with frost from the relentless drizzle seeping through cracks. Torchlight flickered erratically, casting elongated shadows that writhed across the flagstones, mirroring the turmoil uncoiling in Alara's chest. The thorned ring pulsed against her finger, a living ember that synced her breaths to the castle's hidden cadence. Inhale with the wind's moan, exhale with the rain's sigh. She followed Thorn into this fray, her woolen gown sodden at the hems, clinging like a second skin, while the envoy's gazes pinned her like insects to velvet. They were a trio of Eastern vampires, sleek as polished obsidian, their cloaks embroidered with serpentine crests that mocked the Black Keep's thorny sigil. At their center stood Vorak, envoy and heir to a rival throne, his eyes gleaming with the cold calculation of one who had tasted power's bitter edge in shadowed councils. Thorn halted at the threshold, his presence a bastion of restrained fury, the velvet of his cloak absorbing the light like a void. Lyrian lingered at his side, her crimson silk whispering accusations, her hand withdrawing from his arm with deliberate slowness. A Vampir's touch, half-mortal allure, masking the venom of unrequited longing. She had served him through centuries of skirmishes, her loyalty a fragile veil over ambitions forged in the fires of rejection. Once, she had offered her blood in a romance veiled as fealty, only to be turned away for the ghosts of his past. Now, with Ilara's ascension marked by the ring, jealousy festered like a wound, twisting ethics into betrayal's sharp bloom. "The spy is yours," Vorak declared, his voice a silken blade, honed by the intrigues of border wars where clans clashed over mist-veiled territories. He gestured to a bound figure slumped against the wall, Rael, a lesser vampire of Thorn's court, his face gaunt with the pallor of recent turning, eyes wide with the terror of one who had chosen eternity too hastily. He confessed under the eastern moon, trading your patrol routes for our silver. The hunters from the south grow bold. Unity demands your tribute, or your throne yields to those who seize it. The air thickened with the scent of damp fur and iron, the envoy's retinue shifting like shadows, fangs subtly bared in the torch glow. Ilara's pulse thrummed unnaturally, the ring channeling a surge of vitality that sharpened her senses. The faint copper tang of Rael's fear sweat, the subtle shift of Lyrian's stance toward Vorak, an alliance unspoken. She rationalized the clarity as the ring's illusion, a desperate mind weaving strength from fragility, yet it pulled her forward, her bare feet silent on the cold stone. Abandoned echoes of her village life resurfaced, whispers of curses, the fever's grip like death's patient hand. But here, in this hall of eternal schemers, she felt the stirrings of agency, resisted yet blooming like moonlight on thorns. Thorn's glance flickered to her, a silent warning laced with the intimacy of their shared visions. His battles, her solitude, intertwined in the ritual's afterglow. Thorn's voice cut the tension, resonant as cathedral bells tolling dusk. Ethics bind this keep, Vorak, not tribute. Rael's treason is mine to judge, exile, not execution, for one who chose not to die in ignorance. He stepped forward, the torchlight gilding his profile in gold and shadow, a king forged in the crucible of medieval fields, where he had risen from mud and blade, vowing restraint amid the savagery. Guilt shadowed his every decree. Empires had crumbled under his watch, lovers withered in his arms, yet he pondered the existential weight, Plato's cave, where shadows mimicked truth, and Augustine's restless heart seeking peace in the divine. This political storm was but a veil for the deeper war, Ilara's transformation teetering on the brink, her humanity a light piercing his endless night. Lyrian interjected, her tone honeyed venom, eyes darting to Ilara with predatory gleam. "My king, mercy weakens us. The envoys speak truth. The South's hunters encroach, their silver arrows whispering through our borders. Let me handle the traitor, swiftly." Her words carried the texture of betrayal, a Vampir's romance turned rancid, her fingers twitching as if to grasp the ring's power for herself. Vorak's lips curved in approval, the air humming with the undercurrent of conspiracy, rain pattering like distant arrows against the outer walls. Ilara's hand clenched, the thorns drawing another invisible bead of blood, absorbed in silence. The revelation crystallized then, in the charged hush. This was no mere counsel, but a ritual of choice for the realm's soul. She moved unbidden, stepping between Thorn and the envoys, her voice emerging steady, laced with the philosophical depth the ring had unearthed. "Treason thrives in isolation," she said, her words echoing the intimacy of their bond, the hall's flames flaring as if in response. Rael chose eternity blindly. Punish him with truth, not death. I've polished your throne, felt its pulse. It's not obsidian cold, but a witness to redemption's unclaimed. If war looms, let it be forged in alliance, not blood spilled for shadows. The room stilled, the envoy's eyes widening at this mortal's audacity, Lyrion's face twisting in outrage. Thorn turned to her, anguish and awe mingling in his gaze, the proximity reigniting their connection. A sensory flood of shared essence. Her lavender warmth against his storm-scented chill. Visions of thorn-crowned battles blending with her fevered nights. He reached for her hand, the touch a deliberate ritual, sealing her words with his ancient resolve. She speaks for the light we guard, he affirmed, voice low, philosophical. No tribute, Vorak. Depart with peace, or face the thorns that bind us. The ring warmed fiercely, channeling strength into Alara, her eyes flickering crimson for a heartbeat, the transformation edging closer. Not a full turning, but a Vampir's whisper, granting vision beyond mortality without erasing her soul. Vorak recoiled, his false smile fracturing while Lyrion's hand slipped to a concealed dagger, her betrayal laid bare in the torchlight's unforgiving glare. "Foolish king!" she snarled, lunging not at the envoys, but at Alara, blade glinting like silvered rain. Thorn intercepted, his form a blur of velvet and shadow, wrenching her wrist with restrained force. The scuffle echoed, metal clanging on stone, gasps mingling with the rain's crescendo, ending with Lyrion pinned, her jet eyes blazing with the pain of spurned love turned to ash. As guards dragged her away, the envoys retreated into the night. Truce intact but fragile, whispers of war lingering like fog. Alara sagged against Thorn, the ring's pulse a steady anchor amid the chaos, her body thrumming with newfound power that both healed and hungered. He held her, the intimacy profound, guilt warring with redemption in his touch, love inevitable, a curse that could save or doom them both. Yet in the hall's dying light, Rael's eyes met Alara's, gratitude laced with warning. The eastern clans would not forget this mortal's rise. Outside, thunder rolled, heralding storms beyond the moors, and Alara felt the transformation deepen, a thirst awakening that blurred the line between life and eternity. Thorn whispered against her hair, "You've claimed more than the ring. What throne awaits us now?" The choice had bent the keep to her will, but Lyrion's parting glare promised shadows yet to unfold, a betrayal's thorn piercing the heart of their fragile peace. The thunder's rumble faded into a brooding hush, leaving the antechamber steeped in the afterglow of confrontation, where torch flames sputtered like dying confessions. Alara leaned into Thorn's embrace. The ring's thorns a subtle bite against her skin, channeling a vitality that now coursed through her like river water carving stone. Relentless, transformative, yet laced with the ache of uncertainty. Her woolen gown, heavy with rain's residue, clung to her frame, but the chill no longer pierced. Instead, it wrapped around her like a lover's cloak, intimate and unyielding. The air hummed with the sense of scorched metal from Lyrion's discarded dagger and the earthy musk of the envoy's retreat, their serpentine cloaks vanishing into the fog-shrouded corridors like serpents slithering back to shadowed lairs. Rael remained bound, his gaunt form a testament to choices made in haste, his eyes lifting to Alara with a mix of awe and trepidation, as if she were the dawn breaking over his eternal night. Thorn's arms encircled her, his touch a philosophical anchor amid the storm's ebb, eternal chill meeting her burgeoning warmth, a ritual of convergence that blurred the boundaries of mortality and shadow. 5 centuries of guilt weighed upon him, a crown forged in the crucibles of lost wars and withered loves, where he had pondered the Stoic's indifference to fate, only to find it crumbling under this mortal's gaze. Isolde's ghost lingered in his mind, her madness a scar that rationalized his solitude, yet Alara's presence unraveled it, thread by thread. "You've bent the thorns to your will," he murmured against her temple, his voice a low timbre resonant with the hall's vaulted echoes, carrying the texture of aged leather and unspoken remorse. But peace is a fragile veil. Lyrian's betrayal runs deeper than a single blade. Her whispers may have already sown discord among the court, turning ethics to ambition. Elara pulled back slightly, her eyes, now flecked with that elusive crimson, searching his face in the torchlight's golden haze. The ring pulsed, drawing forth visions unbidden. Lyrian's Vampiro heritage, a half-life born of a forbidden union in the keep's shadowed annals. Her romances with lesser lords twisted into envy for Thorn's unyielding heart. Abandoned echoes of Elara's own past resurfaced, the village's scorn, her fevered isolation like a slow drowning, mirroring the Vampiro's fractured loyalty. She rationalized the surge of empathy as the ring's illusion, a desperate weave of connection from her fragile humanity. Yet it fueled a resolve blooming like night-blooming jasmine in cracked earth. "Then let us face it together," she replied, her words steady, laced with the sensual gravity of their bond. "I've cleaned your throne, felt its secrets stir. If eternity is a choice deferred, mine is to claim it, not as curse, but as redemption. For you, for this realm teetering on war's edge." The hall stirred then, the court's vampires emerging from alcoves and side passages, drawn by the scuffle's echoes and the envoy's hasty withdrawal. They gathered in a semicircle, their forms cloaked in velvety blacks and deep crimsons, faces etched with the weariness of immortals who had once been mortals choosing not to die, warriors from forgotten crusades, scholars turned shades, all bound by Thorn's ethical creed. Whispers rippled like wind through dry leaves. The Eastern clan's retreat bought time, but Lyrian's treachery ignited suspicions. Her Vampiro allure, a double-edged blade that had seduced spies into the keep's heart. Rael was unbound at Thorn's nod, rising unsteadily, his voice a rasp of gratitude. "She spoke truth where I faltered," he said, inclining his head to Elara, the first subtle bow in the flickering light. Thorn released her, stepping forward to address the assembly, his presence commanding the space like moonlight, claiming the night. The rain outside had ceased, leaving only the drip of water from eaves, a rhythmic underscore to his words. The envoys flee with their truce intact, but shadows lengthen. Lyrian's ambition mirrors the wars that birthed this keep, betrayals forged in blood, alliances shattered like glass under boot. We stand not on obsidian alone, but on choices, mercy over slaughter, light piercing the veil. His gaze swept the crowd, philosophical depth underscoring the political fray, evoking Augustine's confessions of a restless soul seeking divine order amid chaos. Yet as he spoke, Elara felt the ring's call intensify, a ritual awakening that drew the court's eyes to her, the mortal servant, now radiant in the torch glow, her skin luminous against the hall's gloom, vitality radiating like a hidden flame. She moved then, unbidden, toward the antechamber's arched threshold where the obsidian throne's shadow stretched long from the adjoining room. The ring guided her, thorns warming as if alive, syncing her steps to the collective pulse of the gathered immortals. Whispers hushed. Even the distant moan of wind through battlements fell silent. Elara paused before them, her hand raised, the silver band catching the light in hypnotic facets. "I've known death as a shadow at my bedside," she said, her voice emerging clear and resonant, carrying the intimate timbre of shared visions, their wars, her sufferings, intertwined in redemption's weave. "Abandoned, broken, I polished your throne not for servitude, but for the truths it held. This ring binds not just me to your king, but all of us to the light we guard. Choose now, war's endless night, or the mercy that resurrects even the damned." The revelation hung, a moment of profound choice rippling through the hall like a stone cast into still water. Thorn watched, anguish etching his features, the inevitability of love crashing against his guilt. A curse that healed, a redemption demanding surrender. One by one, the vampires knelt, Rael first, Then the advisors, their cloaks pooling like spilled ink on the flagstones. Even the distant echoes of guards in the corridors bowed in deference, the keep's ancient stones seeming to hum in approval. Vorek's envoys, lingering at the outer gates, caught the shift and retreated fully into the mist, their ambitions quelled by this unforeseen ascension. Ilara stood amid the kneelers, Thorn at her side, his hand finding hers in a final ritual touch, mortal and immortal entwined, the thorns drawing no blood now, only unity. Yet as the court rose, murmurs of Lyrian's escape into the moors surfaced, her Vampiro speed carrying betrayal's seed to eastern thrones. The transformation in Ilara deepened, a Vampiro's edge sharpening her senses without claiming her soul fully. But the hunger stirred, a thirst for eternity's deeper truths, philosophical and sensual, that could either forge their love or fracture it. In the hall's hushed aftermath, Thorn whispered, "You've claimed the throne's true power, not through blood, but through the heart's unyielding choice." But as dawn's gray light filtered through arrow slits, Ilara glimpsed in a polished shield her reflection. Eyes fully crimson, promising a precipice where redemption teetered on the edge of eternal war. The keep bowed to her, yet the shadows whispered of costs yet unpaid. Love's curse weaving toward an unforeseen horizon. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts.